Here we go, and here we are. Oh, and welcome back, everyone, to Of Gods and Gamemasters presents Worldbuilding Workshop and Ask Me Anything Settlements. We are building Rotbadden, the village of Rotbadden, which we worked on in our last stream, and we are working on it from the jump, from the very beginning of all the things. And so some things to take a look at while we're doing that include the world itself, obviously, the terrain around it as we go in to do the work, as we consider the nature of the village, we have to consider what the village has already had to deal with in terms of its environment. We determined a few important things that we need to cover as we are beginning to build this thing. Rotbadden is in a mountain valley somewhat like the German Alps. It is in a mountain valley surrounded by dormant volcanoes. It has hot springs. The mountain valley is forested. The village is between two rivers, which are also warm because they stem from northern hot springs. The village is isolated from the area around it, so it is not part of a greater nation at this time in effect, although it may be officially, like it may be legally part of a nation, but it's been detached for long enough that it is fundamentally isolated and self-governing. And we have some interesting thoughts that there may be giants or some other scary thunder guys to the west and some kind of dragons to the east, as illustrated on this map. So that gives us a basis for some of what we are determining as we go through. Now, one of the important things we're going to deal with here is the pretty standard thing that I do, which is my settlement template, which we will use to help us go through and determine exactly what we're doing. It's not just a template, it's it's like a to-do list. Question for you, how would you represent a multi-layer city? I have a city that has a lid, essentially. It's a park that stretches the entire interior of the city walls above the city below, which is lit by sunlight filtering through quartz canals. Any suggestions? Yeah, if you're mapping the city, you basically, in that situation, you treat it like a multi-level dungeon. You do one map for the upper level, and then what I would do is use dungeon draft, and you can clone that level and then edit it so that the quartz canals above match like the city streets below, so you could see where the light would be coming through, and the upper level size and layout matches the lower level size and layout. I can't really emphasize how useful Dungeon Draft is in that situation. It's tremendously helpful. It's also like a one-time purchase, unlike most of the other stuff out there. And you can get their world building stuff from, there are links on that same site to get their world Wonder Draft world building maps, which is what I'm using here on this picture. and that will be tremendously helpful. Some of the time when I'm building cities, if I'm not going to try to build a multi-layer city, then I'm probably still going to build it, the map at least, in WonderDraft. There's just so much I can do with that, right? So, what we're going to determine next, I think it should be obvious, is that, like I said, we're going to jump in, we're going to grab my settlement template. Hey! It's going really well. Plains of Fate, good to see you. Welcome aboard. I'm doing good. I'm glad to have you here. We are building together a settlement in basically a fantasy version of the Alps, kind of on the German side, at least linguistically, and hopefully you'll hang around and help us do that. But anyway, let me get this into the situation, open up our settlement template so we can see it nice and good, and we can go through it and fill it out. Hey Dino, good to see ya. Welcome aboard. Other people say welcome in. Welcome in's not how I talk. So welcome aboard. All right, so we are going to take a look at the settlement template and get started on building Rotbadden. So obviously, let's get into that. The settlement name is Rotbadden, which is German for red baths. At least as far as I remember. I could always be wrong. We're not going to have a settlement alignment because we're not doing old style D&D. Instead, we're doing Tales of the Valiant. The settlement size is a village. We already determined that. It's about 500-ish people. Yeah, no, we missed you too, Plains. Very good. All right, so we got 500-ish people. Remember, one of the other things we have a kind of really good setup to follow, because over here in my world building series, we have world building your initial settlements, right? And that is another piece of template. It is a verb, but there are actual cities named Baden. So, yeah, it's like bathe in blood, kind of, Rotbadden. We almost went with Blutbaden. Basically, we decided that the hot springs have a lot of iron in them and possibly algae that covers the water red. Yeah, it's used as a noun in several real-world German names like Wiesbaden. Yeah, we went with Rotbadden simply because we didn't want to go, it's a bloodbath, as the settlement. It's not a bad guy settlement, it's just people, and it's intended for a starting settlement. Right? It's intended for what does a settlement look like that you want to start out beginning adventurers in, and you as a beginning game master, what kind of settlement do you want to go with, right? So, back to our... Yeah, I hope it's interesting. Definitely. So back to the ideas of what we're trying to accomplish here. What does your initial settlement need, and how should you describe it? Well, we need the settlement. Well, yeah, if it's a town that they're encountering that they're not from, sure. But this is intended as their original home base. We want this to be where the adventurers start. We want this to be maybe even where the adventurers are from, right? Because it gives them a lot of investment. So the initial home base may or may not be a safe space. This one's not gonna be. We've already shown that there are some dangers nearby. We're definitely gonna need a tavern or inn. We're going to need the social hub. The innkeeper may be the mayor or something, depending on what authority setup we look like. The tavern is a mostly safe space. The church is a mostly safe space. So we're going to have a church. We're going to have a tavern. We're going to have, there's going to be a bounty board, probably, or a job board or whatever in the inn or tavern. And then we're going to figure out what gods they worship. We're going to figure out what kind of shop they have, figure out who lives there, and what kind of interesting village elders there are for people to interact with, families for people to be from. The less fantastical, the better for the grounding of the characters, right? If your characters are from someplace bizarre and wondrous, then they aren't going to feel impressed when they run into wonder. We want this to be someplace prosaic, so that when they go out and they see phenomenal things, those are interesting. Germanic cultures are the primary influence, but it's obviously not real, so we can add in some more things. Okay, we can do things that they did not do in real world Germany or anything, but we should stick to things that make sense for an alpine settlement. Things that make sense for a settlement high in the mountains, in the valleys, isolated from others, right? We want this to have a sense of possibly foreboding for the places outside, a sense of wonder when they see the magics. We want it to feel real enough to the players that when they encounter things that threaten it, it worries them. So in many ways, the more grounded, the better. That does not mean there is no magic. That does not mean that we can't have, a local mage, a local herbalist, the clerics with magic, etc. Those are perfectly fine. Since this one's like for Tales of the Valiant or Daggerhear or something like that. Exactly. Many times start common and prosaic and build up to big and fantastic. Especially when you're building an initial settlement, when you're working on the first place you've ever run, for instance, and the first place these characters start. You want to start small and interesting. Small scale, small scope, small stakes even at first. So defining scale, we have a lot of things, but it is the full range of different levels of people or things. In literature, it talks about the size of the narrative elements, right? It talks about the proportional consistency and balance of powers within a fictional world, so that the extraordinary still remains believable, because we're not going for realism. We're going for verisimilitude. Does it feel real? And then scope is about how big the setting is. I don't know that they would have sports in that regard. They would simply, it's not like trails. It's not like they ski because they want to ski. It's more like, or they do, but they wouldn't have trails per se. They would just go out and find, when there's snow, they'd just ski on it, right? And they'd use skiing to get around. Don't think of it as something that, tourists come here to ski. No, people in a place ski because it's the easiest way to move around on deep snow. Also, this place is not likely to have as much of it because the valley is warm. Despite being high in the mountains, the valley is warmed by the hot springs, which means at the verges of the mountain at the east and west, you might have snowy mountain enough for skiing, if that's what you're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to have sports. Right, you wouldn't have hiking trails, they just have trails, right? Also, sleds actually is super common for the kids, right? And there wouldn't be a trail, they just have, they might have favorite hills, but they'd all be to the east or west of town, because of the hot springs. So what we'll want to mark down then is, in my document here, is kids go sledding, and it's probably to the east, because if you look back at the map again, well, maybe the southwest, right? Maybe the north, not the north, because that's where the volcanic springs are, but like the east and the southwest, if you look on the map, are, away from the mountain passes that they would see as dangerous. Now, teenagers might go there, because teenagers are always... How wet would the soil be? Not necessarily particularly wet. We're not looking at a swamp. We're looking at well-carved rivers in a mountain valley. So most of the soil isn't very wet. They wouldn't have sled dogs because they don't go enough places, right? Sled dogs aren't used as much in alpine areas as they are in wide open Arctic areas. So while they might have dogs, they probably wouldn't have sled dogs, especially since these people are isolated. They don't really travel. And I'm noting that teenagers may be sledding dangerously close to the passes. Yeah, those are distance sports, and you don't have a lot of distance to deal with those sorts of things. Now, you do have all this river. And hot springs. They're going to be swimming. They're going to be rafting if they have any trade with the outside. It's going to be up and down that river. But the thing is, I think they used to have trade, but they don't, right? Remember that isolation thing I'm talking about? We can, after we've developed the village, we can move out and get bigger than that and think about what country this used to be a part of, but now it's isolated, so they don't really trade. They're having to survive on their own. See what I'm saying? Because that is part of the whole idea. The isolation of it makes for interesting gaming and not having anybody to ask for help if there's a problem. And having it be so the player characters who are from this town don't know anything about the outside world until they encounter it saves you from having to explain about the outside world until they encounter it. Right? One of the big things to do, one of the big things we need to make sure we're doing in a situation like this is build specifically for the tabletop role-playing aspect of it, rather than for anything. They might have visitors more often than that, right? I wouldn't say that they don't. I would say it's more like once or twice a year they get a traveling merchant or a bard, right? But they don't really get much news from outside, and what news they get, they don't care about, right? So tinker / peddler / bard a few times a year. So that way they can get some things from outside and we can hand them little tidbits, but it's perfectly reasonable, again, for the player characters not to be aware of what the rest of the real world is like. It saves you a lot of time and lore dumping until you're ready for that and they're ready to go looking. But what I want to do now is look back with that all kind of thought of and understood. Let's look back at my sheet, the actual settlement template, and with that, let's talk about what we think, where we're going to start, right? We have the authorities, who runs the place. Commerce, we've already established that there is very little commerce, right? So that's actually an answer we have. All right, I'm gonna need you to slow down, Dino. You're kind of jumping ahead. Events we don't want to get to until we know what the place is. You're not wrong. A missionary showing up on a holy journey or a body found nearby. Now you're getting into adventure hooks and designs. You want to know what the settlement is first. You want to know what the people are first. Okay? That being said, let's look at demographics. Let's look at population. We know we have 500 plus people, right? Notable tool. Yeah, you're right. But maybe Yes, 500-ish is intentionally very small, right? It's an isolated mountain village, and the intent is for the player characters to basically know everyone who lives there. But it's 500 plus people. That's only the beginning. Who are those people? In the village itself, there's 500 plus people. Are there more people in the valley? Right? Probably. Are there elves in the woods? A mine does make quite a bit of good sense. But a mine, yes. An old iron mine. Very good. Let's put that down under history. Because that is both specifically a locale and it is a it's part of the setting, it's part of the history, and it's a potential adventure spot, right? But let's slide back a little bit. Let's go back to demographics and population. Who lives here? Yeah, dried up, exhausted. Yep. It's one of the reasons that explains why here. The other reason is the water, right? Is the baths. Mineral hot springs are a reason for people to be there to begin with because it's warm, it's comfortable, they can grow better things. They can live more comfortably than... Right. Who lives here is super important. Are they all human, for instance? Or are there dwarves? Are there elves? Are there halflings? Correct. They are protected from a lot of threats by the mountains around them. And those mountains help us isolate it and seclude it from the rest of the world, giving that whole, hey, I don't know what the rest of the world looks like feel for the exploration part of tabletop role-playing, right? So, who are the people? Are they all human? Do they have elves, dwarves, halflings, ogres? Who lives here as part of the overall community, even if the village itself is all human and there are nearby dwarves or nearby halflings or nearby elves, right? Because what you want to make sure is that in this starting area, you have all of the potential player character ancestries provided for. Dwarves doesn't make traveling the mountains too easy. Dwarves don't always mean deep tunnels, especially if the tunnels have been overtaken by something. There might be a relatively small dwarven community nearby. Trolls in the... Yeah, but we're dealing with player character species first. In most of my worlds, kobolds and dragonborn have a tendency to be, as I linked before, direct descendants of dragons. So humans, dwarves, if there are kobolds and dragonborn, then we've got an interestingly cosmopolitan area, and we may have to raise the population of the valley a little bit, but not necessarily the village, right? So do we want something that cosmopolitan? Halflings, humans, dwarves, Kobolds and Dragonborn off in their own community nearby, and maybe elves in the heavy forests. Trolls in the depths of the mountains, most of the time trolls are going to be bad guys. They're mostly going to be monsters unless you are operating from a very non-D&D perspective. My dwarf, one of the things I've talked about here is the way I use dwarves is dwarves come in many of the different Norse varieties. So you have the gray dwarves who are the underground miner and builder types. Then you have red dwarves who work with wood. Shepherds and things, that from my perspective is halflings, which in many of my settings I refer to as brownies or brown dwarves. I like to maintain the feel of dwarves in the mountains. We're going to want them to feel for this basic setting is that the beings in it kind of match the expectations, right? Again, this is not advanced world building. I need everybody to scale themselves back. We're building something simple. Baby's first town, like literally that, okay? So and the Dragonborn and the Kobolds definitely I don't see it. Again, Dino, baby's first setting. You're gonna always want to have humans. You're gonna have to want humans to be the majority in your earliest settings for your majority of beginning players, because they will understand it better. Again, this is not just baby's first setting for the game master. This is baby's first setting for the players. What is it we are learning about? What is it we are, this is like intro to fantasy role playing, right? And I want to show that the intro to fantasy role-playing can still be super interesting. Right? So, humans, halflings, elves, dwarves, dragonborn kobolds. Okay? Siderians or tieflings / Aasimar, from my perspective, can pop up in any population, so they don't have a separate thing. Now, if your ogres are your equivalent of Goliaths or something like that from... Right, that's exactly where we're going. I don't know. I think it may... it looks like I'm chugging a little. Not sure why. But now not as much. Anywho. So tieflings and Aasimar don't need their own place. Let me look real quick in here at the Tales of the Valiant Player Guide. The base Tales of the Valiant Player Guide has available for play Beastkin, Dwarf, Elf, Human, Kobold, Orc, Siderian, and Small Folk. We have Small Folk, gnomes and or halflings. Siderians are the Aasimar / tieflings. We've already added in, true scale kobolds or dragonborn and kobolds, and we've added in and we have elves and dwarves, right? So if we go, hey, let's go straight out of this base book, then we might need to think of beastkin, local creatures that are, based on some kind of animal. And orcs, as a PC group, is in both Tales of the Valiant and in modern D&D. So let's look at that as well. In the D&D 5e Player's Handbook, because I want this to be usable with 5e or Tales of the Valiant, and I'll get into Daggerhear in a second and make sure we've got most of those races. I don't think we're going to have turtle people in this town, but I could be wrong. In the base Player's Handbook, 10th printing for D&D 5e, no, I don't care about 2024. I use 2014 entirely. We have dwarf, elf, halfling, human, dragonborn, gnome, half-elf, half-orc, and tiefling. Okay, so we're covered on our basic D&D races. We're covered if we add in orcs somewhere nearby, which makes sense. We're covered on our Tales of the Valiant as well. Then all we need to do real quick is take a look at Daggerheart's race / lineage options, right? And we don't have to worry about any of this with GURPS because any of these beings can be created and used in GURPS, right? So we don't have to worry about accommodating that. Clanks. I don't see Clanks being from here. Maybe they can. Clanks are Warforged. They can pick them up later as PCs some other place in the world, maybe. Oh, I hear you. I have a lot of urban fantasy work. We will get to that in other streams. Today, we are handling basic fantasy. Okay? Dracona, which is, Dragonborn. Cool, we've got that. Dwarf, got that. Elf, got that. Fairy, actually little winged fairy people, and those are available in D&D. So we might have fairies living nearby as well. Let's mark that down. We might not. Keep in mind, these are just the potential available options. You did say you liked a lot of player character options available, so I kind of agree with you for this kind of thing. Fawn, which in Tales of the Valiant would be a kind of beastkin, and probably in the same settlement as the elves and fairies, because then you have a sort of sylvan grouping from the nearby forests. They may not even have a localized area, right? They just live in the woods. And then Firbolg. Their Firbolg, interestingly, also can be beastkin because they have minotaurs. So maybe, right? Fearbolg, and that gives us a big, big, vaguely ogreish race, maybe. And of course, that does still exist in D&D as well. Thungrill. That's a little bit much for me. I don't want to put that in this setting. Galapa. Yeah, I don't see putting... turtle people here, but they do have actual giants. Now, their giants are only about 8.5 feet tall, so that actually kind of makes them like ogres. So they have goblins. Halflings we've got, humans we've got. Infernus is their version of Tiefling Siderians, so we've talked about that. They're not going to be super common, but they're born from other people, basically. If there is a nation of them, they are probably elsewhere. Qatari, they have cat people. That goes in with the Beastkin. And I might add my Skyloy descendants, which I have built for both Tales of the Valiant, and I've built it for Daggerheart. This is getting to be a lot. We may not have all of these in this one place, but it is a lot of options. They got Orc, they got Ribbit. No, we are not adding frog people here. I don't think. They may be from somewhere else. Simia, no, they wouldn't have them kind of peoples. They would not have ape peoples up in the Alpine area. What do y'all think? What things... So those would be if we wanted to cover all of the options from the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide, the D&D Player's Handbook, and the Daggerheart book. I kind of feel like it's too much. What do we want to trim? What do we want to take out that does not fit? Does anybody hear me? Is there anybody out there? Is it lagging too much for people to hear me, or people, do we know what's going on? Anything? Because I'm trying to figure out if we have all of these options, all of these different beings in this valley, is that too many? Right? for an isolated village. Number one, do we want to raise the number? Put a number not for the village, like the village is 500 humans and halflings, right? Something like that. And then the valley, we give a different number for amounts. You say cut halflings? And Dino says for baby first setting, I'd remove dragonborn, kobolds, fairies, and giants. Y'all are making my life difficult. All right. But maybe. Okay, so if I follow what both of you say, right, then I take out all but one beastkin, which is probably gonna be fawns, because they are found. Yeah, no, absolutely. The mine is near here. We'll get to that on the map in a second. Fawn, because horned humanoids are actually really a part of Alpine myth. So let's take out giants, ogres, and goblins, and fairies. If we take out dragonborn and kobolds as player options right away, yeah, they may even still live like very nearby. And I think it comes down to, because of how the mining operation concept works, is either dwarves or dragonborn kobolds. And I think we actually, like he pointed out, baby's first setting, we keep dwarves. So that gives us humans, halflings, elves, fawns, orcs, and dwarves. Do we want to keep orcs for this locality? Or just make it super simple choices? Humans, halflings, elves, fawns, dwarves. That's 5. Like 5 guys, 5 options makes life a lot simpler in terms of choice paralysis. I'd like to hear your opinions on that one. Yay orcs, nay orcs. When we get done with this, it is, of course, will be available for all of you to use. I will post it up probably on the website. Yeah, no, I get it. Swap in goblins to replace okay, maybe, but like the goblin, my question is, maybe do we take them both out? Goblins are very popular, but we already have little guys, right? Do we use goblins instead of halflings? Okay, again, you two have very differing opinions. What are your reason for wanting to keep orcs, Dino? And what is your reason for wanting to get rid of orcs? Tessie. Now, don't get me wrong, goblins are very popular, and I get that. Yeah, the template is on the website, and it's also downloadable from the store for free. Hang on. I will link it directly. And right next to it, in the same place, is the system agnostic God format. You're here for what instead? You said I'm here for blank instead. Goblins instead of halfling? Sure. Now tell me the reason why you want orcs specifically. What do they add to the situation? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm asking what they're for. There is the link. Orcs and goblins scratch similar itches for players. I don't know that they do. I feel like orcs are really in the big, dangerous, strong guy place, and goblins are in the funny little guy place. Right? Goblins are like a more chaotic version . Yeah, gobos instead of halflings. I think I really like that. Because halflings aren't actually as, for instance, mythological as goblins, right? They are introduced by the wonderful Professor Tolkien. Which means we have goblins. We don't have orcs because they're less mythological. Instead, we drop into that big guy muscle theme and we go back to giants. So that we have the big guy part of the team, right? Humans, goblins, elves, beastkin, giants, dwarves. Or we don't even have to have orcs in the setting. The successor states of Rhaegar doesn't have any orcs. If we trim out the non-mythological stuff, sure, I get it. I just don't know that it's necessary. All right, look. If we want to keep to 5, let's kill our babies, right? Let's ruin our loves. Let's drop it to 5 of these. We got humans, goblins, elves. Humans, goblins, elves, giants / ogres, dwarves, and fawns. One of these has to go. The humans and goblins and the dwarves and the elves, I think, are inherent. I think they are the fundamental basis of this area, with the goblins and the dwarves working together and the goblins and the humans working together, with the goblins kind of being the transition between the two sets. Which leaves us whether we want to keep the fawn or the ogre. And even though I love fawns and I love goat people, and they are aesthetically appropriate for the alpine setting, they don't fit the I want to play a big smashy guy thing, who you almost always have at least one of. Somebody wants to play a big damn Goliath or whatever, right? So I think we're going to drop fawns. And whether you call them Goliaths, giants, or ogres is going to depend on which of the settings you're using them in. They have brand new giant-blooded descendant stuff coming out in Tales of the Valiant Northlands book. So we have humans, goblins, elves, giants, dwarves. Oh yeah, meeting fawns late. There probably are almost certainly fawns in the mountains nearby. They just aren't part of the little village. Now we have a human settlement, an elven settlement, because they're not all going to necessarily live directly together because it's not a city, but they're going to live around each other. So now we go back to the map and start figuring out where on the map each of their settlements are. But we're going to do that after these messages, i.e., we're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute break, and we are going to come back after that break and start placing the non-human settlements in interesting places for the story. All right? I'll see y'all in 10. Thank you all for being here. All the love. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, so they're stone, and maybe they're more builders and masons and quarriers than they are blacksmiths, because we have our dwarves, right, for the stereotypical smiths. Obviously, any PC can be whichever. But for the stereotype, the dwarves should be the smiths, in my perspective. But yeah, alright, so let's get to this map. Obviously, then, our giants live on the edge of the mountains. Right? And, you know, maybe they hold off the other giants, right? Yeah, you were about to make it complicated again. It's fine. These are good instincts. They're going to be useful as you go on. But again, I wanted to show how we can make a much simpler setting still cool. So we got the village of Rotbadden. Somewhere in here, like, we have... Yeah. And they are traditionally so in Norse mythology, by the way. The individual that built the wall around Asgard is a stone giant. No, I mean, sexual dimorphism is reasonable. Why would the females grow tusks as opposed to the males? What is the purpose of the tusk? Like, sexual dimorphism is a thing. Like, unlike a whole lot of other people, I don't generally have my female dwarves grow beards. I mean, they can if you want. I don't care, but the ones that I have generally don't have them. Because for one thing, mythologically speaking, female dwarves were often considered to be fairer even than elves. Alright, so let's look at symbols and put ourselves a place for the giants to live. And, you know, makes sense that it's on a slightly larger scale. How about there? So in this case, the males would be, I mean, the females would be the females would be the ones fighting for male attention rather than the reverse. Perfectly reasonable. There's plenty of species in the world that are like that. So the females would be bigger and more warlike than the men. Oh yeah, no. If they use them for fighting for mates, etc., then the size and utility of those yeah. Female ogres have tusks. Size and beauty have status implications. Female ogres, larger, stronger, usually warriors. Males are builders. Let's look in Old German for some naming again. So we're looking at either Berg or Dorf as the ending. A burg is a town or city. It's not walled, so it's not a burg. Let's call Berg, the other Berg, is a hill. Bergdorf. Mountain Village. Right, so Bergdorf, right there. We have the mountain village of the giants. We have them connected, I think, by a smaller stream that runs down there. I think we're going to end up having our dwarves and goblins at the north parts, possibly at the two places where those hot springs start. So let's put our goblins in the northwest, because I think we probably had two different mines and they had a friendly rivalry going, but now they're both played out. What do you think about that? Yes, the German word for goblin is straight up just kobold. Victor, oh, okay, Victelwerk. Because, oh no, Victelgrube, which means basically goblin pit in German, or goblin mine. What symbol are we going to use? That one. That would be one hell of a large mine when you look at how far across the mountain range that is. Also, company, I think you're thinking of something way later conceptually. Hey Devious, how are you? All right, so up here to the left, I'm going to call that Victelwerk. No, Victelgrube. Which is the goblin mine. And over yonder, to the right, to the east, we will have the entrance to the other mine, both of which you'll note are also the entryway. They're where the river starts. So we've got Victelgrube, and then over to the east we have the Dwarven mine, which is going to be called Zwerg. Okay.
Zwerg.
Yeah, entirely possible. And one was run, one had mainly goblin employees, and the other one had dwarven employees, and because they were goblin and dwarven noble families. And again, it was a friendly rivalry. They never actually... This isn't big enough for a duchy. This is small enough to be, at most, a barony. It's because there's only a few villages, it's probably even only part of a barony. But we can get down to what the governmental setup of it is. The scale's just informed by the amount of people we're planning to put in here. We're really only looking at probably like a grand total of 2,000 people across the whole valley. So it's probably not that big. I'll get to the scale in a second. But it would be part of could have been part of a barony, and goblin nobles started one mine. Dwarf nobles started the other. Friendly rivalry. And we are going to just jump out on a limb and use some linguistic ridiculosity that I just happen to enjoy and make this the Zwergdelf. I don't know if those are visible enough. Is that better? Oh, hey, we're really starting to pick up a little bit. Welcome, everyone. As you can see, we are determining where all these various settlements are going on in this valley. The village of Rotbadden in the center is primarily humans. Off to our west, we have the village of Bergdorf, which means mountain village, and that is where our 8-footish tall stone giant / ogre people live. We have the former iron mine at Wichtelgrube, which is where the goblins, the main goblin settlement is. And over to the east, we hast the Zwergdelf, which is where the dwarves are from. That's Wichtelgrube, Bergdorf, and Zwergdelf. And in the center, the village of Rotbadden. And let me get rid of that extra label that is there for no reason. Alright, so now we have places for our humans, giants, goblins, and dwarves. Our remaining races that we settled on together for this area, we've got humans, goblins, dwarves, and ogres, right? That means we only need to settle on where the primary location of our elves is. And honestly, looking at this, while they could be spread out all over the place, the most likely situation is the broad forests of the east side. And we are going to get super simple with the name here. Alfwald, or Alfwald. Which means elf wood. So, now we have locations for each of these groups to be from. I am not actually sure how I feel about my color choices here. The village of Rotbadden, I think, works, right? Because... Oop, too much. That's central. and the color is different than the others by a little bit. I'm not sure how I feel about the base color that we've got going on here. For the other locations, like maybe they should all be the same color. I think I like that red better. So it stands out more. Yeah, okay. Now, if I can find a way to make these frickin' things outline more. That would be great, because they are disappearing into the mists. May just have to make them bigger. Not quite that big. Cool. Those show up real good. The mines I like. All right, so do we have a symbol for the center of the Alfwald? A grove or something? Maybe? I don't know. We'll put it next to that open spot. And then what do we put in the open spot? We've got a picture of some kind. I'm looking. Yeah. There. It's a village, but it's got trees. Cool. All right. So we have our settlements. I think that's pretty neat. So now that we know that, we can go back to our settlement template and start talking about filling in some of the blanks. I think one of the first things we need to figure out is we got 1, 2, 3, 4, so we're looking at 2,000 more in the valley if they're all roughly equivalent. They import tools, process metal, but not a lot, right? I don't know that they really export anything except maybe lumber, game. We have 2 old iron mines dried up. Town isolated from greater region. Used to be part of a barony that was part of a greater kingdom. So, the place that we are missing something now. These 5 groups are actually going to end up being much more self-sufficient than if they were all isolated, because you got the elves providing game and forest products. The humans can get their own lumber. The ogres are quarrying stone. The mines may be played out in terms of export, but they're probably more than sufficient for the locals still. And the dwarves and goblins mine and make stuff. They're really super self-sufficient. Elves provide game, hunt and gather. Humans farm and provide lumber. So we're talking about the commerce inside now, right? Settle on calling them ogres because the females do have the tusks. We do need to think of what else the goblins provide to the communities. What are goblins good at? Alright, so in Daggerheart, a goblin is sure-footed and has danger sense. So they would be climbing and sneaking and watchmen in Tales of the Valiant and D&D, even though, let's see, D&D 5e, we will go to Goblins from Mordenkainen presents. Got Fury of the Small and Nimble Escape, and they are Fey ancestry. So again, they're sneaky and fighters, but we don't really see what they do in terms of their normal. God. Dark Vision, Fury of the Small. Alright, let's look at goblins in Tales of the Valiant real quick. Yeah, no, they would be excellent hunters. And that's the thing, is I think they're going to be in everybody's bailiwick, helping everybody do the thing they do in ways that only small, nimble people can. Again, we are not doing thieving, and they have small noses. So elves and goblins. Basically, you're going to have subgroups of goblins. You're going to have your wild goblins. You're going to have your farm goblins. And you're going to have your mine goblins. Right. No thieving here at all. But definitely goblins don't have a tendency toward that. Right. Again, to avoid in that anti-Semitic tropes. Yeah, so goblins are involved in all sorts of things. They don't get involved with the ogres quarrying stone all that much, because it doesn't involve getting into small places at all. It involves, lifting heavy frickin' things. So the goblins spend their time around all the other species far more often than they spend time around the ogres. Although they may be helping. Yeah, they may help with, the goblins may help with some building things. So with Stone Giant / Ogre builders, we're looking at mostly stone buildings. We've got buildings combining stone and lumber, basically. The Swiss chalet style is an architecture style of late historicism. From the Alpine regions of Central Europe. Widely projecting roofs. It's Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, France, and Scandinavia. And yeah, they're a mixture of stone and lumber. Like the first floor is very often stone. So that's one possible influence to the architecture. What else have we got? They're definitely going to have the steep gabled roofs and broad eaves because that gets the snow to fall off. Like, there will be snow falling. It just won't be sticking very often in the main valley itself. Wooden pillars and balconies. Stone foundations and thermal mass and walls. Yeah. Stone foundations and walls, wooden pillars, roofs, and balconies. Crime. None, just mischief. If you're going to be a quote-unquote thief in this, rogue in this thing, it's not because you're an actual thief. There's no real crime. There's just kids playing tricks at most. We're coming up on the end of our work today, and we have gotten down to crime. We've gotten some history. We've gotten our neighborhoods, quote unquote, are going to end up being our separate, basically, suburbs in the valley, which is kind of neat. We know what our town kind of looks like, and part of how it looks, by the way, is this cool image. Some of the buildings are kind of like this, probably. right? You see the stone around the bottom and then the wood up top and stuff. That should be really cool, I think. But we are coming up on the end, so I need to remind folks, whoever is hanging out with me, that I will be here again Wednesday at noon. I will be happy to be so. I will be here again Wednesday at noon for world building. I might be here sometime Tuesday. But I will definitely be here Wednesday at noon, and I will be here Friday at 4 Eastern Time for the next sets of world building. And I think we should go ahead and continue with building Rotbadden when we return on Wednesday. And for maintenance of my existence, I do have to go through a few of those things where I go, hey, there's money. I run paid games over on Start Playing Games. I have a Patreon where you can support my work. I have a website where you can look at all the stuff I do, and you can support me directly there as well. I have a YouTube channel, which I literally just posted a new video to about world building, specifically world building cosmology. If you like, follow, and subscribe here and on YouTube, it will help me for relatively low cost on your part, none when it comes to YouTube. And I really would appreciate it. I sell materials on Drive-Thru-RPG and again on my own store on my website. My website has just absolutely tons of free resources for world building and things for specific games. But hopefully I've been entertaining and helpful, and I will see you guys again on Wednesday for our world building. If I do any streaming between now and then, it's just going to be something vaguely random. Thank you, Devious. I will try to have a good one. I obviously have no real control over whether that happens, but I will do my asbestos. That wasn't as funny as I thought it was. When we get done here, I am in fact raiding out. We will be raiding out to it looks like Fey Earth. Which are some cool people. Hey, you're very welcome for today. I'm glad you learned a lot. And, you and Tessie have helped create something pretty interesting, I think. And we will put it up on the website at some point, and I will make sure to credit the two of you in it. All right? So, yeah, we're going to be raiding out to Fey Earth. They are a cool bunch of people, and we should go say, hey. Thank you all for being here. I will be happy to see you again on Wednesday. heck? Here we are. They are doing Call of the Hidden Folk, Found Fae Family, and we are going to raid. Like I said, I appreciate you guys being here for me, and I will see you later. Much love, love to you, love, and raiding now.
One of the fairies says, "Oh, you brought something. What is it?"
Honestly, and like they'll bring up the flail again. If you want
A cinnamon, and he uncorks it, and he's just like, "This smells like some sort of a fine whiskey."
Oh, it could. Yeah, they're all of them very strong. The ones in the little vials are like you're usually supposed to like knock them back.
Wonderful, and he gestures, and a bunch of goblets start to walk towards you. Think Beauty and the Beast as a collection of goblets walk towards you, and this fairy who's standing on the table goes standing in front of the goblets that are nearly the size of the fairy, and taking your bottle, which is only a singular shot, he starts pouring it into each of these half dozen goblets, filling them all with this.
Can I learn that?
And then he puts down the now empty bottle as there are now 6 goblets